"Can I help you?" he asked, his voice devoid of enthusiasm. "I need to print something," I said. "Something big." "How big?" he asked, still not looking up. "Billboard big," I replied. Kevin finally looked up, a flicker of interest in his eyes. "Billboard big, huh? What have you got?" He stared at the documents, then at me, then back at the documents. "You want to print this on a billboard?" "Exactly," I said. "The bigger the better." "Dude," he said, "that's amazing. That's the most passive-aggressive thing I've ever heard. I love it." It started innocently enough. A few packages swiped from porches, a couple of cars rummaged through late at night, some generally suspicious activity in the neighborhood. Nothing major, but enough to make me think about beefing up security. So I did what any reasonable homeowner in the 21st century would do. I installed some security cameras. Nothing extravagant, mind you. Just a standard doorbell camera to keep an eye on deliveries, a couple of motion-activated floodlight cams for the backyard, and one discreetly positioned camera watching the driveway. They were all pointed at my property, capturing my comings and goings, and generally minding my own business. I wasn't trying to be Big Brother. I just wanted to feel a little safer, and maybe catch the guy who kept stealing my garden gnomes. It seemed like a reasonable precaution, I thought, as I adjusted the angle of the driveway camera. The installation was quick, the setup was easy, and the peace of mind was immediate. Little did I know, my perfectly reasonable security measures were about to trigger an all-out war with the queen of the neighborhood busybodies. I should have known. This is suburbia, after all. The first sign of trouble arrived in the form of a tightly clenched fist rapping aggressively on my front door. I opened it to find myself face to face with the embodiment of suburban discontent. Karen Whitmore. Karen Whitmore. Imagine a woman whose entire personality revolves around complaining, whose spirit animal is a perpetually offended poodle, and whose favorite hobby is making other people's lives miserable. She was the self-appointed neighborhood watchdog, the queen of passive aggression, and, unfortunately for me, my next-door neighbor. She stood on my porch, her arms crossed, her lips pursed, her eyes narrowed in a way that suggested I'd personally offended her ancestors. "Mr. Davis," she began, her voice dripping with a mixture of accusation and disdain, "those cameras you've installed, they're unacceptable." "Unacceptable?" I replied, feigning confusion. "They're just standard security cameras, Karen, for safety." "Safety?" she scoffed. "They're an invasion of privacy. They're pointing directly at my property. I feel like I'm being spied on." "Karen," I said, trying to remain calm, "they're only pointing at my yard, see?" I gestured towards the camera angles, clearly showing the limited field of vision. "I don't care," she insisted, her voice rising. "I feel uncomfortable. I feel violated. You need to take them down. Immediately." Her logic, as always, was impeccable. She was being spied on, by cameras not pointing at her. Karen's initial complaint was just the beginning of a relentless campaign of harassment. Over the next few weeks, she bombarded me with a series of increasingly ridiculous accusations and demands. First came the letters. Formal, typed letters delivered to my mailbox, filled with passive-aggressive language and thinly veiled threats. "Your cameras are a blatant disregard for the privacy of your neighbors," one letter read. "They create an atmosphere of distrust and suspicion. They are, frankly, an eyesore." Then came the HOA reports. Karen, it turned out, was very well connected within the Homeowners Association, and she used her influence to lodge a series of formal complaints, citing obscure bylaws and vaguely worded regulations. She claimed my cameras were creating a nuisance, disrupting the neighborhood aesthetic, and even lowering property values. She even called the police, claiming I was illegally surveilling her property. The cops, two bored-looking officers, showed up, took one look at my camera setup, chuckled, and told Karen to stop wasting their time. The whole situation was utterly absurd. My internal reaction was a mixture of annoyance, frustration, and a growing sense of disbelief. And how could someone be so obsessed with something so harmless? Was she really this bored, this petty, this Karen? I tried to reason with her. I tried to explain. I even offered to adjust the camera angles, even though they were already perfectly positioned. But nothing worked. Karen Whitmore was on a mission, and my security cameras were her target. The final straw came in the form of a particularly nasty letter, taped directly to my front door. It was a handwritten screed, filled with all-caps accusations, underlined threats, and a liberal sprinkling of exclamation points. "Your cameras are an outrage," it began. "I refuse to live under constant surveillance. Take them down immediately. Oregon, face the consequences." That evening, she escalated to the neighborhood Facebook group, posting long, angry rants, twisting things and getting increasingly personal. She even implied I was some kind of pervert. That was it. I'd had enough. I'd tried being reasonable. I'd tried being patient. But Karen Whitmore was beyond reason. She was a force of nature, a hurricane of complaints, and she wasn't going to stop until she got her way. Initially, my thought was to go nuclear and call her out, by name on social media. But that was too easy. It was too expected. Ignoring her wasn't working. Reasoning with her was impossible. I needed a new strategy. Something bolder. Something public, I thought, pacing around my living room, the angry letter crumpled in my hand. And then it hit me. A spark of an idea, so audacious, so deliciously petty, that it brought a smile to my face. I remembered all those letters, all those emails, all those social media rants. Karen had provided me with the perfect weapon, her own words. I realized I could use Karen's own words against her, publicly exposing her hypocrisy and ridiculousness. The Billboard concept was born, a giant, unavoidable monument to Karen's own absurdity. Karen Whitmore, you want a war on surveillance? You've got one. Prepare to be billboarded, I declared internally, a surge of defiant energy coursing through me. It was time to fight fire with fire, pettiness with pettiness, and a whole lot of public humiliation. With the Billboard concept firmly planted in my mind, my first task was to gather the ammunition. I needed to compile a comprehensive collection of Karen Whitmore's complaints, a dossier of her digital and paper-based tirades. It was time to weaponize her own words. I started with the physical letters, the ones she'd taped to my door, slipped under my welcome mat, or even, on one memorable occasion, thrown at me from across the street. They were a treasure trove of Karen-isms, filled with all-caps pronouncements, underlined accusations, and exclamation points galore. Next, I delved into my email inbox, searching for every message from Karen. There were dozens of them, each one a masterpiece of passive-aggressive complaining. She'd CC'd the entire HOA board, of course, ensuring that her grievances were a matter of public record. Then came the social media posts. Karen, it turned out, was a prolific poster on the neighborhood Facebook group, a digital warrior fighting for the privacy and sanctity of Sunridge Estates. Her rants about my cameras were legendary, filled with hyperbole, misinformation, and a healthy dose of personal attacks. Finally, I gathered the official HOA complaint forms, those meticulously documented records of Karen's grievances. It was like compiling a greatest hits album of Karen's insanity. Each complaint was more ridiculous than the last, I thought, as I organized the evidence into a neat, chronological pile. There were complaints about the intrusive glare of the camera lenses, the unnatural whirring sounds of the motion sensors, and even the creepy red light that indicated the cameras were recording. It was a symphony of suburban paranoia, a testament to Karen's unwavering commitment to being offended. My next stop was Big Prints, a local print shop that specialized in, well, big prints. I walked in, clutching my meticulously organized collection of Karen's complaints, feeling a mixture of excitement and slight trepidation. The employee behind the counter, a young guy named Kevin with a nose ring and a perpetually bored expression, looked up from his computer. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice devoid of enthusiasm. "I need to print something," I said. "Something big." "How big?" he asked, still not looking up. "Billboard big," I replied. Kevin finally looked up, a flicker of interest in his eyes. "Billboard big, huh? What have you got?" I explained my project, outlining my plan to create a giant billboard featuring a collage of Karen Whitmore's complaints. I showed him the letters, the emails, the social media posts, the HOA forms. At first, he was bewildered. He stared at the documents, then at me, then back at the documents. "You want to print this on a billboard?" "Exactly," I said. "The bigger, the better." Slowly, a grin spread across Kevin's face. "Dude," he said, "that's amazing. That's the most passive-aggressive thing I've ever heard. I love it." We spent the next hour discussing the details. The size, the material, the font, the layout. I emphasized the need for high-quality printing, a visually striking design, and most importantly, complete accuracy. Every word, every exclamation point, every grammatical error had to be perfectly reproduced. This wasn't just a billboard. It was a public record, a testament to Karen's own words. The design process was a collaborative effort, a merging of my vengeful vision and Kevin's graphic design expertise. We decided to go for a bold, impactful look, something that would be impossible to ignore. The headline, in giant all-caps letters, would read, "Welcome to our neighborhood, a message from Karen Whitmore." Beneath that, we'd arrange a collage of Karen's complaints, carefully selecting the most outrageous and ridiculous examples. We'd use different fonts and colors to highlight her most dramatic pronouncements, her most absurd accusations, her most unintentionally hilarious turns of phrase. We included the all-caps threats, "I refuse to live under constant surveillance," the passive-aggressive insults, "Your cameras are an eyesore," and the timestamps from her HOA complaint emails to prove that this wasn't just a one-time outburst, but a sustained campaign of harassment. And for the finishing touch, the pièce de résistance, we added a small box in the bottom corner with a picture of one of my perfectly legal security cameras and the tagline, "Smile, you're on camera." It was a work of art, a masterpiece of passive aggression, a monument to Karen's own hypocrisy, I thought, admiring the final design on Kevin's computer screen. It was perfect. It was beautiful. It was going to drive Karen absolutely insane. Finding a suitable location for the billboard was crucial. I wanted it to be visible, impactful, and, ideally, directly in Karen Whitmore's line of sight. After scouting the neighborhood, I found the perfect spot, a vacant lot at the entrance to Sunridge Estates, right next to the Welcome sign. I contacted the owner of the lot, a surprisingly agreeable old man who seemed amused by my project, and secured a short-term lease. I arranged for the billboard to be installed under the cover of darkness, wanting the reveal to be a complete surprise. The installation itself was a logistical challenge. The billboard was massive, requiring a crane, a team of workers, and a whole lot of careful maneuvering. But finally, it was up, standing tall and proud, a giant, unavoidable testament to Karen's complaints. The billboard was impossible to miss. The giant, bold letters of the headline screamed for attention. The collage of complaints, a chaotic mix of fonts and colors, drew the eye and demanded to be read. And the "Smile, you're on camera" tagline, with the image of the security camera, added a final touch of ironic humor. It was like a tabloid newspaper headline, blown up to epic proportions. It was impossible to ignore, I thought, admiring my handiwork from across the street. It was a beacon of passive aggression, a public shaming of epic proportions, and a monument to the power of petty revenge. I parked my car a discreet distance away, settled in, and waited. It was a beautiful morning. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and Karen Whitmore was about to have a very, very bad day. The moment of truth arrived with the subtlety of a nuclear explosion. I'd positioned myself strategically, across the street from the billboard, sipping coffee and pretending to read a newspaper, waiting for Karen Whitmore to emerge for her morning power walk. And then it happened. She rounded the corner, her pastel pink tracksuit a beacon of suburban conformity, her blonde helmet hair perfectly in place. She saw the billboard, and she stopped. Her reaction was everything I'd hoped for and more. It was a symphony of outrage, a masterclass in Karen-esque meltdown. First, her face went pale, then a mottled red, then a shade of purple I'd previously only seen on eggplants. Her mouth opened and closed, wordlessly, like a fish gasping for air. Her eyes, wide with disbelief, darted back and forth between the billboard and the surrounding landscape, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. Then the screaming started. This is libel! Slander! You can't do this!" she shrieked, her voice reaching a pitch that could shatter glass. She stormed towards me, her fists clenched, her clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. You monster! You've ruined my reputation. You've billboarded me." I lowered my newspaper, a serene smile on my face. "Good morning, Karen," I said, my voice calm and measured. "I see you've noticed the new addition to the neighborhood. What do you think? I call it The Karen Chronicles, a portrait of suburban paranoia." It's illegal," she sputtered, pointing a trembling finger at the giant collage of her own words. "Those are private communications. You can't just publish them." "Everything on that billboard is a direct quote from you, Karen," I corrected her gently. "It's your own words, your own complaints, your own concerns. I'm simply sharing them with the community. You know, in the interest of transparency." "I'll sue you," she roared, her face now a truly alarming shade of crimson. "I'll sue you! I'll sue the billboard company! I'll sue everyone!" "Good luck with that," I replied, with genuine enthusiasm. "My lawyer's already looking forward to it. He finds the whole situation fascinating. He also mentioned something about the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and the fact that truth is an absolute defense against libel. But I'm sure you know all about that, Karen." Watching Karen unravel was more satisfying than I ever could have imagined. It was like watching a volcano erupt, a slow-motion train wreck of entitlement and self-righteousness, I thought, taking a leisurely sip of my coffee. It was a beautiful day. The sun was shining, and Karen Whitmore's world was crumbling around her. Karen, predictably, stormed into the next HOA meeting, demanding immediate action. She insisted that the HOA force me to remove the billboard, that they take legal action, that they do something to restore order and decency to Sunridge Estates. But the HOA, for once, was powerless. Their legal counsel, a timid man named Mr. Henderson, no relation, explained in excruciating detail why the billboard was perfectly legal. He cited the First Amendment, freedom of speech, the fact that the billboard was on private property, leased legally from the owner, and the fact that everything on the billboard was factually accurate, being, as it was, a direct compilation of Karen's own words. He explained that any attempt to force me to remove the billboard would likely result in a costly and embarrassing lawsuit, a lawsuit that the HOA would almost certainly lose. He even, somewhat hesitantly, suggested that the HOA might want to consider apologizing to me. The meeting, which Karen had envisioned as a triumphant condemnation of my outrageous behavior, devolved into a chaotic mess. Some members, secretly delighted by Karen's humiliation, offered hesitant words of support for the billboard. Others, still clinging to the remnants of Karen's authority, tried to argue for some form of compromise. But the overall consensus was clear. The HOA was powerless. The billboard was staying, and Karen Whitmore was on her own. And then, of course, it went viral. Someone, presumably one of the many amused neighbors, took a picture of the billboard and posted it on social media. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times, racking up likes, comments, and retweets. It spread across the internet like wildfire, a perfect storm of suburban drama, petty revenge, and the enduring appeal of watching a Karen get her comeuppance. The online comments were a goldmine of amusement. "This is the most epic takedown of an HOA I've ever seen," one user wrote. "Give this man a medal," declared another. "Karen got what she deserved," a third added. Local news outlets picked up the story, dubbing it the Billboard Battle of Sunridge Estates, and interviewing delighted residents and a very, very unhappy Karen Whitmore. National news outlets followed, then international ones. The billboard became a meme, a symbol of resistance against petty tyranny, a rallying cry for anyone who had ever suffered under the rule of a power-hungry HOA. I became a minor internet celebrity, hailed as a hero of petty revenge, a champion of free speech, and the billboard bandit of Sunridge Estates. My inbox was flooded with messages of support, offers of free legal advice, and even a few marriage proposals, which I politely declined again. The viral fame brought an unexpected bonus, a flood of offers from lawyers eager to represent me in any potential legal battle with Karen. Most were just looking for publicity, but one stood out. Her name was Sarah Miller, and she was a partner at a prestigious law firm specializing in First Amendment cases. She called me directly, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. "Mr. Henderson," she said, "I just wanted to say, I love what you did. That billboard is a masterpiece, a work of art, and a brilliant example of how to use the law to fight back against petty tyranny." "Thank you," I replied, slightly overwhelmed. "I just wanted to make a point." "You made it loud and clear," she said. "And if that Karen tries to sue you, I'd be honored to represent you. Pro bono, of course, just for the sheer joy of it." "You're on," I said, grinning. Having a lawyer like Sarah on my side was like having a legal superpower. She was sharp, she was fearless, and she clearly relished the opportunity to take on Karen Whitmore. She sent a strongly worded letter to Karen's lawyer, the unfortunate Mr. Peabody, outlining the legal ramifications of any further harassment and effectively shutting down any possibility of a lawsuit. She even, for good measure, sent a copy of the letter to the local newspaper, ensuring that Karen's defeat was a matter of public record. It was the final, decisive blow, the legal equivalent of a knockout punch. The aftermath of the billboard was swift and brutal. Karen Whitmore's carefully constructed world, her reign of terror over Sunridge Estates, crumbled around her. Her reputation, once, in her mind at least, impeccable, was in tatters. She became a pariah, a laughingstock, the subject of countless jokes and memes. She resigned from the HOA in disgrace, her final act a pathetic attempt to save face. She deleted her social media accounts, unable to withstand the barrage of online mockery. She even tried to sell her house, hoping to escape the scene of her humiliation. But it was no use. The billboard and the story behind it had become legendary. Potential buyers, upon learning that they'd be living next door to the Billboard house, would politely decline. Karen was trapped, a prisoner of her own making, a victim of her own petty tyranny. The queen of complaints had become the subject of the ultimate complaint. After a few glorious weeks of watching Karen squirm, I decided it was time to retire the billboard of shame. It had served its purpose, and I didn't want to be that guy, the one who gloated forever. Plus, the lease on the billboard space was about to expire. So I replaced it. Not with a blank space, of course, but with a new message, a less confrontational, more neighborly message. The new billboard featured a picture of a friendly-looking dog, wearing a pair of sunglasses and holding a small American flag. Above the dog, in large, cheerful letters, it read, "Sunridge Estates, a great place to live, now with less drama." And below, in smaller print, "Now accepting applications for a less dramatic neighbor." It was a humorous nod to the past, a subtle reminder of Karen's defeat, and a welcoming message to any potential new residents. It was also, I hoped, a sign that things were finally returning to normal, albeit a slightly more absurd and entertaining version of normal. As fate, and a very relieved real estate agent would have it, Karen's house was eventually sold. And the new neighbors? They were the complete opposite of Karen. They were a retired couple, Bob and Carol, who were laid back, friendly, and utterly unfazed by the neighborhood's recent drama. They loved gardening, they enjoyed a good barbecue, and they had absolutely no interest in measuring anyone's grass or complaining about security cameras. In fact, they loved my cameras. "We feel so much safer with them," Carol told me one afternoon, as we chatted over the fence. "You know, after all that excitement with the previous owner." She gave me a knowing wink. It was a refreshing change, a welcome return to normalcy, or as normal as things could be in a neighborhood with a history of billboard battles. Bob and Carol were the kind of neighbors you dream of, quiet, respectful, and completely uninterested in HOA politics. Scene 4, camera footage, 150 words. The day Karen finally moved was a bittersweet moment. Bitter because moving trucks always seem to set off the dogs barking. But sweet because, well, Karen was leaving. I watched the whole thing unfold on my security cameras, a fitting end to the saga. I saw her, looking defeated and deflated, supervising the movers as they loaded her belongings into a large truck. I saw her take one last, lingering look at the neighborhood, her expression a mixture of resentment and regret. And then she was gone. I saved the footage, of course. It was a historical document, a visual record of the day Karen Whitmore's reign of terror came to an end. It was also, I had to admit, a pretty satisfying piece of video. Life in Sunridge Estates returned to a semblance of normalcy, albeit a normalcy forever altered by the billboard war. My security cameras remained in place, no longer a source of controversy, but a symbol of my victory. A reminder that even the most powerful HOA busybody could be defeated with a little bit of creativity and a whole lot of public humiliation. I'd often sit on my porch in the evenings, checking the camera footage on my phone, not out of paranoia, but out of a sense of quiet satisfaction. I'd see neighbors walking their dogs, kids playing in their yards, and the occasional delivery truck making its rounds. It was a peaceful, ordinary scene, a testament to the power of community and the enduring appeal of a good, old-fashioned neighborhood feud. One evening, as I was scrolling through the footage, a neighbor walked by, gave me a thumbs up and grinned. "Still keeping an eye on things, eh?" he said. "Just doing my civic duty," I replied with a wink. Who knew that a few security cameras and a burning desire for revenge could lead to all this? I guess sometimes you just gotta put up a billboard to find your peace, I thought, smiling to myself. I raised my glass of iced tea in a silent toast. to Karen's billboard of shame. May it forever serve as a warning to all future nosy neighbors